Okay, go to the public. Does anybody wish to speak? Going once, going twice. Okay. Approval of the May 5th meeting summary. Does anybody look for a motion to accept?
I move to accept the meeting summary.
Second.
Second. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Okay, agenda items, review and update high-level block diagram, includes identification of components within each area in the block diagram. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of work A and B together, because as we go through the process flow, which is agenda item 5B, we're gonna be putting where that item goes into the block diagram, so this is gonna be kind of a back and forth process. So, by looking at what Jeremy provided first, and this is the overview, and the way, kind of basically using the same kind of format they used for the April 2019 flow chart, kind of give a high-level overview of, from registration to tabulation. So I just kind of want to go through there, make sure all of each one of these pages that we have in the flow charts fits somewhere into the block diagram. And then we can start after that, looking at, okay, what did we miss? Is the things that have been missed or whatever else. Some of the feedback stuff we might have, and I'll take for an example, poll workers being to update in the e-poll books and the address, and that going back to the recorder's office. Those kind of things that are not included in here yet. So those are the kind of things that we start peeling back layers of the onion that we'll need to get to. Do I need to speak up a little bit to get the recording, or I'm okay?
Yeah, I can barely hear you.
Oh, you can even barely hear me?
Yeah, and I don't need hearing aids either.
You're not like my wife, huh?
Yes.
Okay. So this first step, the first two, one on the overview, 1, 2, 3, vote, meet the eligibility, submit the registration to vote. Those are all basically contained in the registration and voter rolls. Okay. Mail-in voters, voters on the active early voting list automatically send a ballot, not in the AEVL, so we have that, those two processes. We go down, the ballots are sent directly to voters by the vendor, either mail. So this is really a
Yeah, this first page was designed to basically highlight the entire process
right.
in one single page.
So that kind of fits right into that whole voter roll step, right?
Yes, that one
Where the printing and it gets mailed into the
would.
So I'm labeling that voter roll block on the block diagram that we have as a number 2,
Okay.
just to track all of this stuff. Then the early voting in person, the actual voting itself. So when we go down in the early voting persons, the voter who appears in person at the early voting location, that would go into probably block 3 under the voting block from the overview page. The affidavit verification, or the verification of the affidavit envelopes, that's in the verification, so that's the verification block is 4. And then they're sent over to tabulation. So it's a 4, 5, all valid, 5 being tabulation. All valid ballots are counted at the election center. That's part of Unofficial results are posted, being on election night and continuing all till all ballots have been counted. So we have both, we got the tabulation, and then we have the both in the results in Canvas, unofficial and official, correct?
Yes.
Would
So-
that be a good thing to do in the results block in Canvas right here, where they're posting the unofficial results, like at 9 o'clock, we get the first, I use the term dump, but the first results posted, and it's usually as I watched over the last couple of years, it's that whole mail-in bowling and voting and early ballot voting center, mail-in votes, early ballot center votes that have already gone through the whole process of signature verification, tabulation, unofficial results. So that's usually that
That's the
first drop what we get on election night.
So are you saying that you want another, basically, so I'd have all valid ballots are counted, another box saying unofficial results are supposed to be?
No, I don't think we need to have another box in here. We can highlight, we're gonna highlight what goes on in each one of these things, official and unofficial results posted.
Okay.
I don't see for that right now the necessity personally of an additional box. We might find out, like, when we go to the next diagram where you have the ballot development itself, we've got to figure out where to put that, and that's something that Director Hargrove brought up a couple of weeks ago in the regular EIC meeting. We didn't have that accounted for in here, so, you know, this is a iterative process. And then Canvas documents prepared, sent to the Board of Supervisors, that's all within this Block 6, which would be results and verification. And then on Election Day voting, recorder updates votes, early voting data throughout, okay, recorder updates, part of like all voters are casting early ballot. Okay, so this part of it here, probably under Election Day where the recorder updates the voter data, that's kind of a 1 and a 2, where they're updating the voter roll to see if you voted or not, and then they're loading it into the PE poll book, which would be the voter roll or section 2. Poll workers verify voters' ID and registration at the, okay, that's Election Day voting. The 3, then the next 2, it doesn't show on the black diagram, but the early ballots are dropped off, provisional are sent to the recorder. So when you go on the block diagram under the voting block, the same day elections, there's a line that goes up, and it should then go into the verification by the conditional, and then you have another arrow that, and this is my fault, the way I put this together, it dropped those lines.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, that's my fault, because I had put it on there originally. So these are the regular ballots, go right to tabulation. Okay, so this is 3 to 5. Early ballots are dropped off. So then this goes from 3 to 4. Go through the verification process. And then it goes back up through the verification process to tabulation. Okay, so I think we've got each one of those steps there are covered somewhere in the block diagram. Okay, so if we go to the next page, the initial ballot creation process, this does not show up on the block diagram at all. So we need to, either create a new block in the block diagram, which I'm not really excited about, because you want to take this high-level overview, but if we could make this a component within the initial ballot creation.
I mean, it kind of fits in the printing into, in a way, this is basically just the steps that lead up to that point. But yeah, if we're trying to fit it in there, that's.
Yeah, see, this is something, some of this, let's see, political parties, entities sent approval for reviewing preliminary ballots, PDFs are sent to the printer. So this registration voter rolls, I don't know.
Ballot proofs of every possible ballot to everybody's review.
The ones that they would have on theirs, I don't know if they necessarily wrote every single one. If you just have one race, say US representative, you just need to see that once, because it's gonna be there every single time, the exact same way.
But there's
All the races. that they
200
would have
plus
it printed on.
precincts and some of them are split.
So, yeah, they would get anything that they have candidate on, but not necessarily every one. Because a lot of those splits are just have, you might only have 35 races with a, say, Republican candidate, but you might have 500 ballots with those combinations. So they only need to see that race on it, because it's gonna show up the same on every ballot.
Are you sending a pre-printed ballot or a PDF file?
I think we typically send PDFs.
Via email.
Yes. Though if they wanted to see the paper copy, we probably not bring that up.
Well, I mean, just the existence of these PDFs floating around in the emails and going to everybody, that means anybody could print a ballot anytime on any printer, anywhere on earth, and submit it to Pima County.
It would be, I mean, it is a sample ballot, it is marked, it would not be able to be run through anything, but yes, we do have to create sample ballots, so they can see that for us to test.
But the
on.
official ballot PDF image that we send to the overseas voters
Yes,
and the military voters is not stamped. It's the real ballot.
that one is
PDF.
different, that's after this process, yes.
And that's a ballot that could be printed on any printer anywhere on earth by anybody and submitted to Pima County, and you wouldn't be able to tell that it's not a real vote.
I'm not 100% sure how, those ballots that they get, they typically fax back in, because it has to be duplicated, we would run those, if you're talking about the email ballots and things like that.
So somebody within elections or the recorder handles that, right?
Yes.
So somebody at the recorder's office is, or there's a
We
team.
send them the PDFs, they send them out.
And so they comes back to the recorder's office and somebody is actually putting it on a ballot that can be tabulated.
We eventually, for any ballot that is faxed in or is not on a readable kind of ballot setup, which anything received back like that would be, we would have to duplicate.
Okay. So
This
on,
is different than a ballot that is mailed out by them, so it's two
Well,
different
why aren't
things.
the overseas and military people receiving a pre-printed ballot to mail back?
How many of them are?
Why, I mean, I look at at that step, which is further on in the protocol, and that was one of the ones that you edited. The military and overseas voters receive a PDF file, not a pre-printed ballot.
I don't know if, this is something I honestly don't know because it happens from the recorder. I don't know if they send any pre-printed. I don't know if it's all email. I'm not sure how that works for that.
My assumption is we might mail some, and somewhere it might be difficult to receive mail, they would give me more time, but we have to verify with the recorder.
Well, I know when I was in the military, I got a mailed ballot. I got it, this was back up till 2000. I got a ballot from the Genesee County, Michigan Recorder. And then I just mailed it back in.
Ballot PDFs are sent to recorder for use for emailing military and overseas ballots. So they're emailing them a PDF,
Mhm.
not an actual. PDF files also used to print early ballots at early voting locations and for secured voters or secured voters.
A secured voter, protected voter, basically, on election day, they would have to vote provisionally, but if somebody with that, there's confidentiality program, or who otherwise doesn't, basically has their address confidential.
There's people on the voter rolls that have their address confidential?
Yes, anyone who, there are people like that, because your voter information is a public record, for most people, but obviously people in any kind of address confidentiality program, you could not give that information out. So in certain ways, like on poll books for us on election day, like, it'll show up as that, and you don't have that information. So that would have to be, been verified with the recorder. I can only speak to us on election day, those people would have to vote provisionally, then the recorder verified. I can't speak to what the recorder does.
More to talk about. Make sure you take good notes here on questions as we go along, Arthur. You know. That's just something that we're gonna have to, I think, question in the full meeting once we get this resolved here.
Right, well, that's a question that's been brought up at Libertarian Party meetings, is whether there's a PDF file that people can just use, or if you have to scan an early ballot to make a fake PDF to create a fake ballot. But either one of those would theoretically work.
Yeah, so the people who are getting the email ballot are gonna be mailing it back or faxing it back. Again, I'm not sure technically what they have to do, but it would be probably not, it wouldn't be like on a 19-inch regular ballot, it would be something that we would have to duplicate then, typically.
Because the 19-inch pieces of paper are not freely available.
And it's more difficult to get. And if you're getting this, I imagine that they're printing it out on a regular piece of paper and then comes back to us. So,
Now, my understanding is that there's some dispute in Maricopa County over PDFs that were printed at a slightly smaller size on some ballots. The voter, as far as they knew, was voting a valid ballot, but it couldn't be counted because of that.
it would have had to, it would be counted, it would just not be able to go through the machine.
It would have to be reprinted on and expanded to match.
I don't know what Maricopa necessarily does, but for us, when we duplicate, we put it on an express vote ballot that is then capable of being run through the machine. So it would be no different than any ballot that comes back ripped or damaged or anything like that. You have to duplicate that in a form that can be read by the machine.
Okay, but that is the standard protocol, it's not to just consider those to be unreadable ballots and toss them.
No, so any ballot that would come to us from the recorder has already been verified through their process. The signature verification process for an early ballot, anything overseas, anything mailed in, would go through their process, then come to us. So once it's come to us, that person's identity has been verified, it's verified that it's a valid ballot. So we simply count it, and if we cannot count it in the machine, that's when the duplication process happens, where we have to basically duplicate that onto a readable ballot.
Okay.
And that's whether the paper was a little bit off, whether it got printed slanted, whether it got ripped, whether it's anything that would stop it from being read.
Okay, so this initial ballot creation process, just trying to find a placeholder for it on our block diagram right now, because I just want to make sure everything's are accounted for in both spots. So we got candidates involved, we got the election department involved, we have the recorder's office involved, we have the vendor involved. Are the preliminary ballot to PDFs are sent to vendors, and so the test ballots are printed and shipped to elections. So they send you, the vendor sends you the test ballots. And then once tested and approved, so you have somewhere in the process a way to test these? How is that tested?
Yes, so, I mean, we test them, obviously, we're proofing them, you know, throughout the process, making sure all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, all the information is right. You also need to test them and make sure they go through the scanners, the LNA testing process and all of that. So you also need to make sure that they're read by the scanners correctly, that when you fill in this oval, it's showing up with this person. So that whole, it's all part of that testing process.
Yeah, because I really didn't see anything in any of the flow charts that talked about the testing process at all.
In the first, in this
In,
flow chart,
even this one here, and now this is the only place where it says test. I don't have anything here to, on the block diagram, included for testing yet.
we could, I mean, we could definitely add the LNA testing process somewhere.
So all of this stuff really here all of this stuff, this initial ballot creation process is a back and forth between the parties, the recorder, the elections department, the printer, back to elections, and then back to the vendor for printing.
Yes. I think the best way to look at this is the background process of everything that we do prior to that ballot, the initial ballot. So it's initially gathering the information, it's programming the election, make sure all your races are there in the correct order, make sure all the candidates are there, and then the back and forth, making sure everybody's on the same page before we start sending them out.
There's another step in there. After the PDF files are created and sample ballots are generated, they're disseminated to the various political parties who do their own markups. And that's what they use for the LNA, from what I understand.
That is part of it. That is when we have these ballots. Of course, we're printing on demand, so we would print those ballots, and then the parties come in, they sign them off. The SOS does their own LNA as well for statewide elections. So
LNA stands for what?
logic
Logic
and
and
accuracy.
accuracy.
Oh, L and A.
Right. So those are the more official tests of where we're testing it as well beforehand, making sure everything is correct before these happen. But yeah, I think it would be a good idea to add those at some point, probably on this page, so.
On the block diagram page?
Maybe not even here. If we're adding something about the ballot creation process here, I think adding
Yeah, I think it
something
needs to
about
be
the-
included on there. We just have to have a placeholder on where it is in each one of these blocks.
It's somewhere between 1 and 3, I guess. It's all, voter registration, of course, is going on all the way up until 2090.
Right.
It's continuing, then it's an ongoing process. So for us, the initial ballot creation process, candidate filing period, that's sort of when we view the electoral process, the election starting.
Okay.
So that's why, for us at least, this is the start point.
Mm-hmm, okay.
And I don't know if it just kind of next to 1A, 1B, or somewhere in there with 2. I don't know.
Or it's an input in here somewhere.
Mhm.
So we've got a hanging, and I'm gonna just write this down for right now, a hanging initial ballot creation process. You know, I'm gonna just call it, label it for myself right now, hanging, because we don't quite know where it's gonna be placed in the flow yet or not. Okay. I'm gonna call that hanging. Okay, ballot process. Ballot orders are sent to the vendor.
Are we, ballot process continue page?
Yeah,
Okay. This is the one that has, it's the first one that the recorder had changed one little thing.
also, you actually input it in here also, you,
Not in the main one, I didn't want to change that, since it's already been posted, but in the insert, you would replace this page.
okay, so you gave us this page,
Yes.
input this page.
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing that changes is the second row down, second box from the left, ballot PDFs are sent to recorder for use for emailing military. They added the settings PDF files, also use to print early ballots at early voting locations in Fort Secure.
Okay, so, yeah, that was always a question I had, because the early voting sites don't use e-poll books.
No.
So this is their methodology to put that ballot into those 200 and some variations, depending on how many precincts we have.
Right,
Um,
each center no longer is restricted to one.
Yeah,
It is essentially the same, I don't really want to speak for them, but it's essentially kind of the same process, though. You're pulling up that voter's ballot style and printing them their specific ballot, based on the PDF that's in.
okay. Blank stock. Okay, so the top block is 2, then going down to the left, those 2 on the left of that, ballot PDFs are loaded to the e-poll books. Okay, so that's a 2. Ballot PDFs are recorded, used for emailing. Ballot PDF is also used to print early ballots at voting locations. So that's part of 2. Elections orders blank stock to send to vote centers. That's really,
I would say it'd be 2.
yeah, we might want to label this voter roll and ballot. Oh. Okay, so that one's kind of hanging in there. I didn't have that in there at all. Orders blank ballot stock for use in early voting locations. Voter appears at early voting location, has a ballot printed. Okay, so that's all part of 3. Let's finish going down that left-hand side. Ballot stock is allocated to each vote center. Okay. So from that, in that second row, the third from the left, elections order ballot blank stock. If you follow that arrow down, the blank ballot stock, ballot stock, ballot stock. Okay, and so then that's how the ballots are printed. So this is all your prep for the same day elections.
Yes.
So this kind of goes into a 3. Voter appears, inspectors provided with inspector's notebook at training. This notebook contains the official ballot report in combination to access the cage. Okay. Yeah. So the inspector's poll books, I've heard them used in other states as, we call that our poll book
It's, so the
in
inspector-
Michigan.
The inspector's notebook is, it's a notebook that the inspector gets prior to election day, and it has information on how to open the cage, it has various forms used on election day. It may have keys to the vote center, if the vote center needs to open up, anything like that.
So does it contain things like, do you keep a log in that inspector's notebook of how many blank ballots were
Yes.
in the stock that came in? You then you place a printed ballot into the gray box after the voter votes. So minus any ballots that have to be redone.
Right.
Or
we
whatever
actually-
the term we use here is.
Spoiled.
Spoiled, yeah.
Um,
So spoiled, a spoiled ballot plus the ballots in the gray box, plus the remaining ballot stock should equal the total inventory of the ballot stock when you started.
Yes, that is the,
And so is there a check somewhere in the process for that?
that is the official ballot report. So the official ballot report that is in the inspector's notebook is, it comes pre-labeled with the amount of ballot stock that was issued to that voting center.
Okay,
At the end of the night, the inspector and the other poll workers as well have to sign off for the amount of ballot stock they used, the blank ballot stock left at the end, the amount of ballots voted, the amount of provisionals voted, the amount of conditionals voted, any single piece of ballots, any test.
okay, so the total of all those things equals the,
Running of every single piece of paper.
okay, so the total of all those things equals the,
Should end up.
should equal the amount of ballot stock you got originally.
Yes.
Okay.
Just one other thing, emergency ballots, they're also in the cages, and I'm assuming Runbeck prints those as well.
Previously, yes, that is not something that we are using going forward. So previously, the emergency pre-printed ballots was something that we used for the last two elections as we were sort of transitioning from
Okay.
precincts to vote centers. But we will not be sending out pre-printed ballots.
So were emergency ballots used then if a voter showed up at the wrong precinct and then, or no, that would be a
Right,
provisional.
no, they were basically sort of a fail-safe if the printers shut down everywhere. You could pull that out an emergency ballot, and the complicated thing is we would have to have all 800 whatever ballot styles at each vote center. So it's a little untenable for vote centers. For every, and at a vote center, anybody can go, so.
Right,
you would
so
have to have
vote styles don't equal the number of precincts?
roughly with splits.
But some precincts have split jurisdictions.
Right. If you have a fire district in half of it and not in the other half of it, you would have to have two separate ballots.
And so then, on the voter roll, you would be able to identify which one of the two splits that they get.
But you also had ballots for like people who could only vote federal election.
You also have those, so pretty much, you are guaranteed like no fewer than 550 or so ballots. That's with no splits.
When I was working as an inspector, we had 4 different ballot styles at one precinct, and that was before all the
Yes.
merged precincts, so.
So it basically, in answer to that, we're not gonna use pre-printed ballots. The fail-safe, if the printers don't work, is to use the express vote, which anyone can use.
How would you mitigate any power failures then?
What do you mean by mitigate barriers?
I mean, you know, what's gonna happen if we have a power outage at a particular vote center?
The express vote's battery will last several hours,
Okay.
plenty of time for us to get.
So everyone goes to the express vote
Mhm.
then, okay.
And
That-
they're not dependent on a continuous internet connection there. They have all
Yeah.
their ballot images. The
They would, so if you lost complete internet, everyone would be voting provisionally, and the express vote is not, no. The ballot styles in there are voted in, you do not need internet to do the election. So if you lost internet and printers, you would have to vote provisionally, if you chose to vote at the center, and you could have your ballot printed on the express vote.
So I'm hearing this for the first time. So e-votes, your e-vote machine
Okay?
is connected to the internet?
Yes.
What's connected to the internet? If you lose internet connection?
What do you mean when you say e-vote? The express vote?
Yeah, the express vote.
No.
So what's the purpose of having an internet connection?
For the e-poll votes.
Oh, the e-poll books, I thought they used the cellular connection back into the cloud.
That is what I'm referring to. Are we splitting?
Well,
Internet.
well, it is different, because you
Okay.
use a cellular connection to connect to the cloud, okay? When I say an internet connection, I'm talking either hardwired or via Wi-Fi back to the cloud,
Okay.
okay? If I'm using my phone and not using it Wi-Fi, if I send an email over a cellular connection, then it connects to the internet at the mail server. If I'm using a Wi-Fi connection for that, it'll go to that Wi-Fi router and then access the internet automatically. So we're using e-poll books not in a standard way. If some of them are connected via Wi-Fi connection to the internet,
They're connected to the same source via the Cradle Point connection unit at every vote center.
okay, so the Cradle Point is a cellular connection?
I don't know enough of the technical specs.
It is, I think it is.
Differences.
Yeah, so it's a cellular connection. So those cradles then,
Okay,
you do not connect, so on one side of the cradle, it's talking to the e-poll book within the voting center.
yes.
They're exchanging data back and forth. Now, out of the cradle the other way, you're going to the cloud somewhere, wherever the e-poll put master in the sky is.
Okay, this is what allows the e-poll books to talk to each other.
And allows the e-poll books to talk to each other. So, can the e-poll books be programmed, and we're kind of getting away from what I wanted to accomplish here, can the e-poll books be programmed not to use a cellular connection to get to that e-poll book in the sky, so they can talk to each other, but just use a straight internet connection?
I don't know enough about the technical differences to answer that question
When you say
right now. I don't,
a cellular connection versus, I mean, the difference would be a cellular connection or a hardwired connection.
Right,
You're at a library in a lot of places where you could theoretically plug into their local area network that's directly wired into the.
exactly.
internet. Or you could connect to the library's Wi-Fi.
And it gets a direct internet connection versus going via cellular.
The need for that is because every polling center needs to know where every voter has voted at every other polling center. Otherwise, somebody could go around and vote at 200-some polling centers. as a
I think I'm
single
just getting,
voter.
I'm
You
just,
wouldn't be able to pull them out after the fact. They have to be able to communicate that this guy already voted.
so I thought the e-poll books were supposed to use a cellular connection. That's why they have a site.
They can use any kind of network.
there, I can look this up and give you specifics. I think
Yeah.
it's getting a little too
Y-
technical
it is.
for me to just
Okay.
answer offhand, and
I can clear up the mess a little bit. So, there is a contract with Verizon. to
Right.
Provide a separate, special, connectivity between the vote centers and the cloud. periodically, and I'm still trying to get these answers from elections. These Delta files are transmitted up to the cloud through that cradle connection. It is a cellular connection.
Okay,
They do not use the local Wi-Fi.
okay,
So, then replication process on the cloud occurs, and it's disseminated among all e-poll books throughout the county. I still don't know how long that takes. And so, it's a distributed database. But as far as the prayers and everything, yeah, it's just a standard, Wi-Fi. It's a local, the cradle essentially.
is a Wi-Fi router within, yeah,
A local area network.
yeah,
And I don't, because I don't know technically enough,
Yeah.
yes, the cradle point is what connects everything together in that network, right?
Right.
We do, like he's saying, use Verizon, and that's where I can give them
Okay.
cellular service, so, but I don't wanna answer the technical specs.
It
because
has
it's
to
not
be
my thing.
cellular service.
It goes from there, it goes to the cloud, that's how it all.
yeah, so back to the original point about power.
Yeah.
So if we don't have backup power at a site, and we have primaries in August, we have monsoons in August, we have power outages in August. So then that theoretically could take down, if a vote center lost power, it would take down that vote center.
No.
So it would, the express votes can last for several hours.
And Verizon can last 12 hours on battery power.
But you even, so if you had lost all power and you could now not connect to the cloud, the e-poll books would have to, and there, it's an iPad, so it lasts for a while as well. You would have to vote provisionally because you don't have that connection. But a person could vote provisionally, vote on the express vote for a period of several hours until we could get power restored, and then we could get something else out there.
So you're not on the wireless connection at all when power is out. You're not talking to Verizon when power is out.
If you lost all power, no, the cradle point wouldn't be able to work. You wouldn't-
Right.
So that's,
Does that make sense to you, Tom? 'Cause I
Yeah, I think so, yeah,
Yeah,
It
you know,
does.
Voting with the express vote is the manner in which they mitigate a power loss.
oh, okay,
What you are eliminating, or what you're not pulled out of the equation, is the fact that now you're not able to tell the cloud database that a voter checked in. Okay, and so that's why they go to the express vote and a provisional ballot. So for
Right.
the period of time.
that makes
power is
sense.
that is, and of course, with vote centers, you can always go to a different vote center.
out. Mhm.
That's, the contingency plans in that regard is you can go to a different vote center, or you can vote on the
Okay.
express vote.
Those provisional ballots have to be significantly longer to process. They're stored separately with the voter's name on the outside of the envelope.
Yeah, what do you mean by longer? Overall, yes, because they have to go back to the recorder to be verified.
Before you can count them all.
Yes.
So if I was at a vote center and the power went out, and then I'm presented with, I can vote provisionally,
If the wholesale power went out, yes.
right? So, and then I say I don't wanna vote provisionally, then I would just have to go to a
You have
different.
to go to a different vote center or wait until we fix the situation, yes.
Okay, so we kind of,
Is that gonna be diagrammed at all? That process, an if scenario?
yeah, I think we need to figure it in here at some point in time.
Well, and there was also something I discussed with Jim Leschers. Every vote center is gonna have a specific IP address, and in theory, hackers could get a hold of those, create a denial of service on the internet connection at any specific polling place that they chose to. They could do it from India or China until they tracked it down. Because it's
Vendor mails early ballots to voters, voter mails. Okay, so this right-hand column be straightforward. Okay, so that's all within block 3. Then we have the bowling place set up. Let's test it. Okay, so the polling center setup, that's all part of, that's all contained in that block 3. Voter was the,
So the next one would all be block 3.
yeah. Voter was the, okay. Okay, so we don't have all the special situations is where a person comes in and brings an early ballot and wants to vote or same-day ballot.
No, that would not be special situation right now. If they had already turned in their early ballot, they would have to vote digital. So a special situation is just anyone who has to vote digital.
If somebody brings in their early ballot.
And says, I don't want to vote, I don't want to hand this, and then it gets
So they
spoiled.
wouldn't- That's what I'm saying, they would not go to special situations.
Okay.
Just be a normal situation.
They can either drop their early ballot off, if they say, I don't want to vote this, you spoil that, and then you check them.
Okay, so do we have that step included in this flow chart?
Yes, the special situations process?
What we just said, we could bring in an early ballot, you don't want to drop it in the blue box, you want a ballot printed on demand, you turn in your early vote, it gets spoiled, gets put in the official book, right? As a spoiled ballot?
Yes, spoiled early, it's a little bit different, because you're not actually spoiling it like you would if you printed a ballot, but you write spoiled on it, you put it in the ballot.
The next page is special situation.
Okay.
Um,
So all of this stuff really is contained in block 3. On the voter check-in process on election day. Okay. If a voter is unable to check in at the regular check-in station, they are sent to special situations. Okay. Conditional ballot. Okay, so this is all three, right?
Yes.
Actions that are happening on voting day. So the special, that one I went to before, because this was a bone of contention in some places, and it's that whole bringing in an early ballot, getting it spoiled, getting another ballot.
Yes. So this,
Where is that? Because, and I'm saying this, Jeremy, and everybody else, is because, you know, my understanding was, when I talked to an inspector down at one of the voting centers in Green Valley, is we were trained that somebody brings in a ballot, we spoil it, then they are generated a same-day ballot, correct?
yes, so,
But then I also, but the poll worker needs to collect that ballot, that mail-in ballot, prior to issuing a printed ballot that day.
no, not exactly. So this law had just been changed actually between, I think, primary and general, so this led to a lot of confusion.
Okay,
If you have requested an early ballot, but you do not vote that early ballot, you can come in on election day and you will vote a regular ballot. So up here where it says if the voter is unable to check in, you would be able to check in, so you would just vote a regular ballot, regardless of whether you brought that ballot in with you, that early ballot, or you just left it at home.
okay,
So when you say, now if you happen to walk in with your early ballot, I would tell the poll worker you should write spoiled on it if they want to vote a regular ballot, put in a spoiled. But if you don't bring it in with you, we still know, because of the poll book setup, whether or not you have appeared and voted or not. The recorder will still know. So it will show in the poll book that you requested an early ballot, but you did not vote it. You will be allowed to vote as a regular voter, regardless of whether or not you bring in that early ballot. So no, you don't have to bring it in and have it spoiled.
So if you don't have to bring it in and have it spoiled, couldn't you also vote it as a mail-in ballot?
You could, and
Would that be twice?
by that you would be voting twice, which would be a crime, of course. The thing is, the recorder, by the time when they get that ballot after election day, they have already seen the data from election day. They will have seen that you checked in and reject that early ballot. So,
So somebody who just said, I can't remember if I voted or not, I don't remember, I'm senile.
if it happens, they will have only voted once. If, say, they had already sent this into the recorder a week beforehand, it's going to flag on the e-poll book, this voter has already turned in their early ballot. So now, tell them that if they insist they didn't, here you go, you voted provisional. When you go to the recorder, they're gonna look and say, nope, you already voted an early ballot, we're not counting this.
so if they're on the early voting list to get a mail-in ballot, they don't mail it in, so they still have to vote a provisional ballot at the voting
They
center.
don't.
They don't.
As long as they don't turn it in.
Yes, in general, no.
Right, previously, if you had requested one, you would have to vote a provision. Now, because of the poll books and having the up-to-date information, if you requested one, you can still vote a regular ballot.
So the verification still has to come on the back end when you,
Yes,
And that's a whole other process.
so yes, if you walked in with your early ballot, deposited it in the early ballot thing, went to the next vote center, wanted to vote, you would show up as a regular voter, you would check in. By the time the recorder's office got that early ballot after election day, you're already gonna be shown as already voted, so they're not gonna count your early.
Okay, so that early ballot deposit box at the votes center requires you to have it in an envelope regular.
Right.
Yes.
Ready to be mailed. You can't just stick the ballot
No,
raw.
it has
No.
to be inoculated on, but we give copies of that envelope as well to poll workers in case somebody just brings in a ballot, you know, you have to put it in the envelope. It's gotta go through the recorder, signature verification process and all that, so.
The more complicated you make a process, the harder it is for you to manage.
It is, and see, the problem is that somebody can bring their mail-in ballot with them, and at check-in, we say, well, you need to hand that over to us so that we can spoil it. And we had one person that came in and said, I'm not going to give it to you because I have marked this ballot already, and I'm gonna use it to copy over to the main. So we had to have one special person just to follow that guy, or, you know, not physically behind him, but just watch him to make sure that when he left, we stopped him and yanked his
Yeah.
mail-in ballot.
And so, like I said, in Green Valley, they were telling these people they had to turn in that mail-in ballot. Now, I remember one of our fellow commissioners, I think back in January, said at the polling place she was at, or he was at, I remember what, that they had to watch this person until, and so, to me, that, the folks in Green Valley said, you gotta turn it in. If you don't turn it in, and they called the sheriff's department. And then we had we had inconsistencies.
It was, obviously, it was a very new
Yeah.
process, and we were trying to get it out there. If someone does that, we tell poll workers to write spoiled on that ballot in ready, make it very clear. We don't want anybody taking two ballots to the voting booth that are live ballots. So if somebody insists on using it as their sample ballot, write spoiled on it.
That leaves open the possibility that they didn't tell you they had it with them.
And that's why you just have to keep an eye. I mean, somebody, it can kind of get crazy. You can pull it out of their shirt if they snuck their ballot in there or something. I don't know.
Jeremy, is there any real physical difference between a ballot-on-demand ballot and a mail-in ballot?
Yeah, that was my question.
It won't
Does
be
have some
folded.
Marked,
It is marked
The-
early.
The printed ballot will not be folded.
If someone's just intent on, trying to rig things, and both of those ballots, so if the guy making sure that he stops, the guy that brings his early ballot, if both of them end up in the gray box, it's gonna get stopped. They're gonna yank. the early
somebody
ballot
has to go
out
through and
before
look
it's
at all those ballots to find them.
Right, it would need to happen at the polling place. They would need to, and I think we're talking about a very
Yeah.
sort of extreme situation. The ballots are marked differently.
Right.
They're marked early.
Oh, yeah, and you know what, you're right, because I do remember that.
And the mail-in ballots will be folded, because they had to go in the envelope.
Yes.
If they had gotten out, then yes.
It's an obvious.
That would be the obvious mark
Yeah.
for poll workers to detect.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't, so, in the closing process, you actually open the gray box and count the ballots that are in there? Okay, okay.
And it's gotta match what is on the e-poll book.
Now, let's suppose that poll workers are sitting there and at the end of the night, they have 100 extra ballots in the gray box.
That's a problem.
That's a real.
So what they're doing, and I think we mentioned it on here with the official ballot report, that's what they do. So they'll take that out there, compare and contrast that to the e-poll book and check-ins, and they basically need to figure out, was it a sort of a clerical issue where they didn't check someone in as a provisional when they should have? Did they not spoil the ballot correctly? Is it something that's just a procedural issue, and we do have the correct amount of ballots? They would need to figure that out. And if not, then once we get it, we figure it out too. 100, I have not seen anything, obviously, like that. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 differences, and it could be a lot of different things.
It's the person who got early ballot, created their own PDF, whited out that early on it, found the right size paper and printed 100 of them, and stuck them in his shirt and put them in the ballot box.
I mean, it's kind of an extreme thing. That would likely not, that obviously would flag, and when we saw that, those ballots aren't all likely not going to be read by scanners. We would, something to that.
Or he used a military PDF to.
We would catch it, as soon as we go through on election night and we go back and check the hand count, check that, if we see something like that, obviously that's something you stop and you figure out.
Sorry.
Okay, so everything on the vote center closing process is really contained in block 3. receiving station ballot, so this is port, okay. So this is when it goes, everything goes to tabulation.
Yes, so for this, because we're just talking about election day here,
This is a 3 to 5.
yes, basically, these ballots on election day are not going through verification. That's that bottom arrow.
Right.
That's basically that arrow right there, them driving to the receiving station and then to tabulate.
Early ballot processing, okay, so this is the verification process.
And this is another one that was replaced by one of those.
Okay.
ones. The only thing that changed is that very bottom box.
Okay,
I don't think it was really a structural change, it's more how they worded it.
that's right. Getting rid of those. Coroner notes for return to early ballot.
Are we on the special situations page, or?
We're on early ballot processing. And we had an update that came in. If you brought in printed copies of that, did you bring in a printed copy? Tim? You're following along. Did you bring in printed copies of this?
No, I just
Oh.
got it from her,
Oh, okay.
so we're on early ballot processing?
Right.
Gotcha.
I mean, it varies. Varies, there are some.
Well, I didn't, well, my granddaughter, she changed the way she signs her signature. So she had on file one way, and then when her ballot came, she signed it envelope another way, and it got rejected. And so they contacted her,
Right.
and she had to refill in a new, form showing her new signature.
Yeah, I know they have processes to do that, I don't want to speak for them.
That's
Number of
part of that curing process or whatever they call it.
Right.
I'm gonna recommend that we wait until we have a recorder representative to, tackle this one, because,
Yeah.
it's very complicated what goes on over there.
Yeah, so, yeah. But it all is contained in block 4 on the block diagram. So I'm just making sure that what we have in the flow chart here, I can place it somewhere in the block diagram.
Yes, this page would be all four. And then, so this next page would be sort of, they are to us now, but I guess it's sort of in between 4 and 5.
Where are the early boards at? It's in the elections department?
Elections department, that's.
So everything from that second block down is elections,
Yes.
and the top box is recorder. It transfers,
Yes, so this top box is basically the bottom box from the one before. It's,
okay, so it's basically going, this is a 4 to 5, the recorder, and then the elections, when they do the tabulation, this is all part of all of this stuff back down to here. Once verified, early boards open the envelopes. Envelope from the empty, they are rewrapped, early list. Verified, accepted, early ballot, unfolded, duplication, early ballot box.
so I would.
So this is all part of We haven't tabulated anything yet.
Right, it's in between that, it's more under the lines of verification, but on the election side, I guess. So somewhere in between 4 and 5.
So this is all part of the early ballot processing continued. Okay. Duplication then. The duplications board sits in elections.
Yes.
So this is all really, this is kind of on a front end of 5. So,
Yes, I feel like it fits in between 4 and 5 too. It's the elections process after we get these ballots from the recorder prior to going to tabulation. And then this next one, provisional conditional ballot processing, is the last one that had the insert changing. This one's a little bit more in-depth, so the box, last box to the far left, last box to the far right. Previously, it was not accepted, additional envelope remains at the recorder's office, and this is not transferred to election for tabulation. That changes, that's not exactly the case. It is not transferred for tabulation, of course, but it is transferred to elections, stamped not verified, and then eventually, those ballots are transferred to the treasurer along with everything else.
So the treasurer is who ends up with all the ballots at the end,
After the canvas, yes.
and they're stored indefinitely, or?
It's typically, I think, 2 years.
okay, so this is verification. This is 4.
So is it these election boards made up of multiple members, or who decides if a ballot needs to be duplicated?
Yes, I mean,
It's not one single person making that decision, it's
no,
a
so the
board of.
duplication process, once they're initially opened up, the early boards who are sitting there, if they see a ballot that is written in half, right, obviously that needs to be duplicated, so that's going to be sent. There might be other ballots that we don't realize that process until tabulation, when they just can't go through the scanner, in which case they would be sent to duplication at that point. So at any time in the process, you realize a ballot needs to be duplicated, that's when it goes in.
So this is kind of a back and forth between that same-day elections and that line that goes up, the arrow to verification. This is called kind of
This is there.
a loop-back process.
Mhm. So, yeah, it's in that 3 to 4 range, so on election night, we get all of the provisional conditional ballots. We go through them, and then we send them to the recorder. Once the recorder has them, they check them, verify anything that is good to go, gets sent back to us for tabulation. Everything that's not, that's the not verified ones, so. It is essentially, we get them on election day, get them to them, they get to us.
And how many ballots would you estimate need to be duplicated in an election?
It can vary, it just-
Hundreds, thousands, 10?
More than 10, it would just vary a lot. I wanna say maybe a few thousand last time. I don't know the exact number.
7,000 or 10,000?
Was it that many?
So, and a lot of it is also kind of subjective. I mean, you get a lot of voters who are tearing their ballots, that can happen. A lot of them who are filling it out, that's basically makes it unreadable, that can lead to it. Obviously, if you have printer problems or something like that, it could lead to it. But duplication, it's a fail-safe to make sure every ballot does get counted.
Well, and I mean, I was part of the recount process on the last election, and it was probably 1 out of 100, or maybe 1 out of every 200 or 300. They didn't fill in the bubble. They just wrote a circle or a line through it. And definitely have discrepancies. Every time you count a ballot like that, sometimes that bubble gets counted and sometimes it doesn't. But those were not designated for duplication. There would have been tens of thousands if those were all.
Yes, I mean, and it kind of depends on how bad it is or how that is, so.
And when we had discrepancies with the official count, that was always what it came back to, was a bubble that somebody had just, they hadn't filled it in.
Okay. Tabulation. Okay, so in between where you've got all the intersecting lines, let me see if I can follow some of this stuff. Once tabulated, ballot boxes are sealed. So coming out of election day, ballots are scanned and counted. You've got 2 lines, you got one that comes down, but then 2 that go over to the right. One of them goes into once tabulated, the other line goes into throughout the process, early ballot tabulation. Select batches of early ballots to be used as audit batches during the hand count. So that's just an extra step that's in there.
That line is actually sort of off. I'll have to play with these lines, but if you start on the far left, third one down, election day ballots are scanned.
Right.
That's not gonna go to that far right box beneath it, that's gonna go to that middle box beneath it. I think that line just ended up there.
Yeah, we're gonna need to get that whole thing cleaned up there,
Yes, that's.
I think.
It is, it's a little tricky because you have your early ballots and your election day ballots both going into that big box. But you also have them going in separate boxes because the process is a little different for the hand count audit. But I can clean up the arrows to make that a little more clear.
Okay. You can also use like dash lines or a different colored line or something like that to try to clarify stuff, because you might want to come down. Let's see, throughout the process, early ballot tabulation. So that's election day ballot, early ballot tabulation. Yeah, I think that needs to be cleaned up a little bit there, Jeremy.
That line should actually come directly from the early ballot and middle one. It's just the line's coming from the wrong spot.
So it looks like you are starting to count 2 weeks before the election. You just aren't releasing those results?
Correct. Early ballots, that's the point we can begin.
So there are people who know how things are going based on the early ballots.
Very few and who don't look at it. Yeah. And that is, I mean, the reality is you have to start tabulating.
Because these machines are so much slower than the old punch card readers.
I mean, they're fast, but there's a lot of ballots, so,
Well,
and you have to get the bulk of it.
And when we first brought them in, it was under the condition that every polling place would be counting its own ballots with its own scanner. That was the way it ran for many years, and we had 400 plus individual scanners and then you just have a card with the results on it that you can or eat at the end of the night. But you have all your results right then.
Right, I mean, that
You
is,
have a few provisional ballots at every polling place, but we were counting everything immediately.
Yeah, and that's the way,
different ways to do it.
when I was on the Board of Canvassers in Michigan back in 2016, that's the way our elections ran. You scanned your ballot, you tabulated your ballot, and then it gave you the display to get rid of the duplicate ballots and the bubbles and the things. It actually said on the display, you had a discrepancy in this race. Do you want to spoil this ballot, get a fresh one? Do you want to ignore it? You didn't vote on this one. Do you want to ignore it or not? That got rid of so much stuff. And we had 100% tally in by 11 o'clock, you know.
And when we did the punch cards, we have it by 10.
Wow.
Government inaction,
I know, if I was king for the day, and so this is something that we can't fix here in Pima County, the legislature has to fix it.
that's right, but half of this flow chart would get thrown away if we went back to the way it used to be, where we got our totals on the night of the election and we knew who won.
I know. So, we still got, we need to find a place to put the hanging initial ballot creation block, something to account for power outages. We still don't have anything in one yet for the recorder, for their process of entering the stuff that comes down from the Secretary of State's office on the ballots, the mailed-in registration forms like this one here. The recorder's office uses, so really it's how it's entered into the database.
And I mean,
Yep, I know that. I'm just writing down, this is still outstanding things that we don't have accounted for in the electoral process. You know, the voter registration applications, what's the process of getting them into the voter roll? The online stuff that comes down from the Secretary of State down to the county, how does that get into the voter roll, right? Because each county handles their own voter roll, correct?
yes, not as specific, of course, it's.
Pima County has a contract with Eric. So how do they use Eric in the purported two ways it's supposed to be? Finding people that haven't registered to vote, and then finding people that are registered and vote in multiple states, and cleaning up the voter rolls. So, you know, entering into the database, cleaning up the voter roll. We talked a couple weeks ago about, or a couple months ago, about the process for dead people. You know, we got the e-poll book correction. How does that work? You know, how does that work from elections? Is there something in the official book that the poll worker gives and say, I changed this in the e-poll book, or how does that work, you know? So, you know, we still need that cleaning up the voter rolls is not contained anywhere in this flow chart too. You know. So, appreciate all the hard work, Jeremy. I mean, this isn't necessarily easy stuff, you know? And I think you've taken everything that was in here and made sure it gets transposed, and we're developing the as-is currently for 2023 right now here in Pima County. So, to me, this is leaves a lot of questions. We all had questions on what about this, what about that, And I think a lot of these questions we should also ask, once we get this a little more codified, for the entire EIC, to answer questions at a meeting. That's why I said, Arthur, to jot down, some of these questions, because some of these questions are gonna come up again, I think.
Pima code is going to be involved other than maybe elections for tabulating for the election this year. And that's a whole other can of worms, is the city of Tucson has their own voter database. And they manage their own ballot processing and everything, correct, Jeremy?
I can't speak to their,
Yeah,
what they do with the
but
voter
I think
registration part.
elections is used to tabulate ballots maybe, but
We can be, if we end up basically having a combined election.
Yeah.
If there are more things, we might end up playing a greater role in that, but they
Okay.
run their own elections.
they do, yeah, it's a mess as well.
Okay, so let's, between that, I'll bring up, in 2 weeks, we still got some outstanding, we still have some holes in the process that, for our first run through, that we've seen, and for me, we talked, the initial ballot creation, where do we put that? How do we account for power outages? I think, which is big here in Pima County, especially in the fall or the summer when we have holding primary elections with, and then stuff, hopefully the recorder will, come up and say, how do we enter the database? And what's the processes for cleaning up the voter rolls? Because I think in state statutes, it says we get the death notifications. They come down and they can pull them monthly to clean up the voter rolls. But then there's other things too. Let's say we have, voter registration cards that are sent to an address, to a home, and the homeowner says, these people have never lived here before. What is the process for adjudicating that? Okay, and it's happened.
I think there are homeless people that are listed.
Yeah.
That can be recorded on.
And so you ask that's a great one, because there's probably close to 10 people that have a residential address of the courthouse, 240 North Stone. Their mailing address is the UPS store in the Continental Shopping Plaza in Green Valley. So what precinct do they vote in?
I mean,
That's,
that's the recorder and how they do that, so I don't know.
yeah, I mean, so, there's a lot of that. And so, we'll see if we can, pray for some transparency. Anybody got anything else? Let's, Jeremy, if we can, get these updated here,
Okay.
there's especially, if we could find at least places to put the initial ballot creation, power outages. I may take I'll take another crack at my block diagram where I've noted these things in. Before the July meeting. I'd like to, that July meeting, be able to present something to the full EIC with an initial first draft of the electoral process in Pima County, and be able to present this, to the full EIC. What do you think?
Well, I agree.
Do you agree? Yeah. So, Appreciate everybody coming, appreciate the support. Go- Vanessa over there, just going away at it. I know, we all do. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Well,